Prime Minister says the future of care is homegrown. So let's talk about what that actually looks like. As the care worker visa comes to an end and the Securing Britain's Future strategy unfolds, we're spotlighting what real-world adaptation truly looks like from the ground up. Our Homegrown Care Talent Series, in collaboration with the Dorset Care Association, is a 4-part exploration of what Gen Z really thinks about care careers, including honest stories from those who walked away. And finally, how do we move on from emergency hiring to intentional talent building rooted in loyalty, mentorship, and culture? These aren't theories, they're lived experiences of providers, staff, and future leaders navigating change in real time. So the question isn't if change is coming, but rather, are you ready? Thank you for joining the first part of our 4-part series, Homegrown Care Talents. We recently held a roundtable in response to the UK government's Securing Britain's Future white paper announcements. The central message was we need to reduce reliance on migrant care workers and grow our own domestic talents. On paper, it sounds like a great plan. Invest in homegrown talent, coach the next generation, build a self-sustaining workforce. But here's a question, and this is the question we're exploring today. What happens when that investment has already been made and it still doesn't work? That conversation is a direct continuation of that roundtable and asking whether the homegrown talent pipeline is more fractured than we think. I'm joined by 3 guests who each had a front row seat to the care sector through family or professional experience. And yet, 2 of them, Willow and Albert, chose 2 different career paths. So we've got Albert, who works in post-production for film and TV, and we've also got Willow, an event production and music professional, who also DJs as a side hustle. And finally, we have Anna Knight, who is the CEO of the Dorset Care Association, who also happens to be Willow's mom. She spent decades mentoring, supporting, and shaping the care workforce in that region. Both Willow and Albert had a really unique opportunity to be coached and brought into the business by someone with over 20 years experience. However, they chose not to take the path. So today, we want to understand why. Because if we're serious about building a sustainable care sector, we need to start listening to the people we're hoping will lead it next. Thank you, Willow, Anna, and Albert for joining. Hi, guys. Thank you, Willow. Okay, so we're just going to go straight into it. So I'll start with you, Willow. You were an observer of care through the family. You've seen your mom coach and you've seen everything. So we'll start with you and then we go to Albert. So what is your story? Just give us a little bit of an intro about yourself, what you know about the sector and all of that.
So I'm an event production and music professional and DJ, and I manage a club venue that's 2,700 capacity and kind of oversee production, operation, health and safety. And then also run a booking agency for female DJs, which is kind of advocating equal opportunities and safeguarding whilst kind of excelling my artists to do as best as they can. I think there has, I guess, been a bit of a crossover of what mum does in healthcare and care for people and kind of what I've ended up in, because there's still big elements of health and kind of like looking after people. But I think the healthcare side of things, of going into that as a profession as you guys do, it never seemed, I guess, glamorous or something that would kind of work along a lifestyle of, I've always loved music and I guess somewhat partying, and it was just never something that was massively attractive. And I think, I guess, growing up, you'd see the harder sides of things and like the lack of support that mum would have had and the kind of levels of stress she had, while she's also excelled making herself who she is now. Like, she's done that all herself, but not without seeing so many difficult things. I think as an empath, like a self-diagnosed empath, I always just saw it as something that I don't know if I could handle the sadness, especially like through COVID, seeing what happened. I think I'd be good at the job, but it just never seemed like something that was feasible or kind of would benefit me personally.
Wow. Albert, let's hear from you. Thank you so much, Willow, for that.
Thanks.
I'm Albert, I'm 27. I am a post-production technician for film and TV. I studied photography in London, and that's where I live now. But yeah, after like a couple of years of gardening post-uni, I decided to move into the film industry. Honestly, I can't really remember a time of like care being advertised to me to like move into. I don't know whether or not that's because I wasn't paying attention in my careers advice at school, which is quite likely, or if it just wasn't there. Yeah, I don't know. And then I suppose I wanted to be in some capacity in like the creative industries, studying photography and then moving into film.
So Anna, could you please tell us a little bit about you?
Yes, I can tell you about me. So I run a care consultancy where I work with lots of different types of providers. I run a large team of trust assessors, and I'm the chief exec for the Dorset Care Association, and also have a brother with Down syndrome, type 1 diabetes and early onset dementia, which is Willow's uncle. So, you know, I'm listening to what they're saying and they're spot on. It is actually quite glamorous because, well, look at me. It pays a really good wage as you work your way up. And, you know, and Albert is spot on as well. You know, at no point in careers does anybody say to anybody, have you thought about going into care? Have you thought that, you know, a registered manager is, you know, earning 80k plus, you know, 120k, 200k, and it's not a glamorous profession. It's not seen as that, but actually it is. And in terms of, you know, the music side of things is brilliant. And in terms of production, if you were to literally link production into care, it's massive. But if we don't tell people that, and if we don't sell it like that, how on earth is it going to be attractive? And, you know, Willow's also right. She saw a very stressed out mum dealing with, you know, end of life situations, 24-hour on-call situations, charging around the place, being quite stressed out. So probably me as an advert wasn't the best thing. But actually the reality is when I hear Willow and Albert talking like that, it makes me really sad, because we kind of sell it as it's for people to wipe bums and to help somebody when they die. But actually the reality is working with a young man who, let's say, has got Down syndrome, who's wanting to leave home, wants to learn life skills, you know, wants to get out there, wants one-to-one support, wants to go clubbing, you know, wants to do stuff. It is really incredible. And we just don't hit the mark with anybody who's young to say, you know what, this is actually really good.
So Anna, I work with care providers, and I hear what you're saying. You're saying if we advertise it differently, then perhaps someone like Willow, who previously mentioned, it's just not glamorous. For this is the narrative. Lots of young people want to do things that they feel very proud of. They want to be able to go out or whatever and go to work parties, etc. If you're a care provider, how would you advertise to someone like Willow? Because the job doesn't really leave that much room for flexibility. So I can see exactly why Willow would have that thought, and Albert would say something like, it wasn't really advertised to me, because the constraints around the job itself, it wouldn't really advertise to people like Willow and Albert, who would quite frankly do the job very well because they have access to yourself.
I mean, they do the job very well anyway, because they are both incredible empaths. And I think the reality is, if we were really sensible, we would actually be looking at individuals doing the kind of university courses that Willow and Albert did. Because the reality is they are able to look at production, take things apart, put it back together, deal with a crisis. If something's going wrong, exactly like Willow's just said, you know, she's involved in the safeguarding side. Albert's making sure that the health and safety side of things are done. These are individuals who actually, if we took it apart and looked at what the sort of background and training that they did, could be brought in and could be used in different ways. And we don't think outside of the box. So we think people have to, you know, do a very basic health and social care course, and probably they might not have very good GCSEs, and they're the people that potentially could feed in. And actually that's not right. And we don't think like that, but that's how it's advertised from outside. So how do we make it better? We look at the type of candidates who've got great values, great experience, who can see much more than just in a care home delivering dom care. You know, somebody like Willow, she can juggle. She could, you know, run a variety of projects at the same time and really make a difference to people's lives. You know, Albert has got so many different skills, you know, gardening, photography, post-production, managing, driving, sorting. You know what, put all that young talent together. Imagine what we could create.
So, Willow, I'd like you to bring it back into the conversation. So I know you said you've had first-hand experience seeing your mom doing this job, and you've seen the mental strain and all of the negative impacts it's had. What about the positives? Because there could be somebody else out there. You've had direct experience seeing your mom, but there might be someone else out there who also has the same academic background as you have. So what are the positives if taking away the empathetic side of it.
I can definitely see, like, from watching Mum, it's kind of working alongside families and people and seeing the positive outcomes. I think especially the places Mum's worked in, she's kind of gone into organizations or into homes and managed to kind of rebuild them from the inside out. And that positive impact on the individuals is obviously absolutely incredible. When I was at school, or the people that I'd seen going into care separately, seeing how someone like Mum and her peers have climbed the ladder, I never knew that this kind of occupation was something that you could earn money from, because kind of like what Albert said, at school you're not really told about it, and it tends to be something that is a fallback job, which I now know isn't. Right. But that is kind of what I think that the main demographic of young people see that role as, but you don't realize that you can really climb the ranks and kind of create your own path. Because I guess for what Mum's done is she now advises people on how to do it, and like what you guys are all doing, it's kind of rewriting it and working with, I guess, the government on your lived experience to be like, hey, that doesn't work, or hey, that does work. The individuals that do these roles are the people that make such a positive difference.
Thank you, Willow. So Albert, I want to ask you, why did you choose photography? The reason I'm asking is because I want to know exactly what led you to do that, and to see if there are any ways we could actually link that to the care sector.
I chose photography because I always enjoyed taking photographs, and I found it a very interesting way of like looking at other issues. Like, I feel like photography as a subject, it's sort of like taking like a sociology degree through the prism of photography, and that's like what you're looking at. So I took it for those reasons, and I like taking photographs, obviously.
Oh, okay, so you did it because you loved it?
Yeah, and found it very interesting, really. You know, there's a combination of that.
I'm just going to jump in, Obi, and just say this. If you think about what Albert and Willow do, they've chosen a career where actually they can express themselves and express their likes. And exactly what Albert just said, through the prism of a lens, Willow does it through music. And actually, if you then put that into the world of social care, imagine that passion, that expression, and what you could do with that. And, you know, I've known Albert since he was tiny, and actually, you know, had the pleasure of going out for dinner with Albert a couple of weeks ago, and his partner, and his ability to interact with the world, his humour, he's very calm and very kind. And, you know, this is the exact reason these are the people we need to take us forward. And actually, I'm the oldest here, as we all know, and potentially these are the individuals who will be managing the people who look after me. Sorry.
Absolutely, because I didn't hear anything about payments, funny enough. Because when I asked you in terms of why you went into it, you were talking about what you love.
Well, let's be honest, there's not much money in the arts industry. And that's why I moved into the film, because it's more of like a stable salary rather than like a freelancing photography job, where it can be very high, but you have to work very hard for it. On the subject of money, was quite shocked when hearing Anna say about like the salaries that can be earned, because I feel like you sort of associate it with being like minimum wage. We go back to the line of like unglamorous, like obviously there's probably families and individuals who like thank you for it, but like kind of structurally like an almost thankless task of
like in and out.
Caring for very vulnerable people on not that much money, maybe being overworked. I feel like that maybe is the perception of people my age of care.
I guess that lumps in with like the NHS as a whole. The narrative around the NHS right now is people that have studied for 6 years are still are working for free somewhat, and then also when they break through that threshold, they're still earning not a lot of money and not getting a lot of care, and that's a narrative that really runs.
Quite frankly, that's what we see in the media every day.
I do think the narrative around it is negative as well. Like, you don't hear when care goes well. You hear about COVID, or when there's been some kind of like anomaly in a care home or whatever.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Anna, I'd like to bring you back into the conversation, because you work with providers. You're the CEO of the Dorset Care Association. So, you know, even though, yes, absolutely, lots of providers are working within certain financial constraints. However, it's still a sector where you have amazing career development, fulfillment. So I'm surprised to hear that they actually don't know that in care, in social care, I know lots of people know, okay, in healthcare, you can have a career, but people don't think you can have a career in social care. And it's crazy because there are lots of people who are thriving and flourishing in it.
I mean, the sad thing is I'm not surprised. Willow's grown up with, nice things, and we've had a nice environment. And as the children have got older and I've been able to earn more, it is a career that you can earn a lot of money in. The reason I'm not surprised is because I do quite a lot of volunteering with youngsters who may be excluded from education or are struggling. And I sit with them and I'll say to a big room of people, how much do you think a registered manager can earn? And they go, 20,000. I go, keep going. 30,000. And then as we start talking and they realise that, a newly qualified registered manager is normally looking at a minimum of 50, and over time you're going 80 plus with commission, and they're really surprised. And I'll give you an example. Recently, I worked with a group of pharmacists and they were really not interested in social care. And by the time I'd finished, we've now got 3 of those pharmacists who've gone into becoming registered managers because they can earn more and they felt it was less stressful. And so I think it is really sad that that's what they're saying. But what else would they know? Because we just don't share this information. So you start doing your qualifications, which are hard but really well supported. I mentor people through them. Get your level 5, get your level 7. You're away, and you really, really are going to earn a decent wage. Hard work, but anybody earning a lot of money has to work hard.
So how about the narrative of the care sector in the negative light and all of that? Like, we've just spoken about the positives. Could we talk frankly about the actual business model of social care? Because if we do want to attract talents like Willow and Albert, what do we need to change? I'll start with you, and then I would like to hear from Willow and Albert to see what sort of business model would work for people like them to come into the sector.
I mean, a lot of this is about values. So, you need to attract the right people. So we need to be careful about some of the people that we might consider attracting. But it's about saying to people, come in, learn your trade. And if you're good, you're going to learn your trade really quickly. Start doing your health and social care exams and start getting your qualifications. You'll be supported through them. You won't be charged for them. You'll have days off to study. You're not expected to study through the night. There'll be mentors working alongside you. And, you don't have to stick to one area. So Willow will know, I've gone from learning disability to forensics to dementia to, every type of care there is. People don't know about this either. So here's your other business model. When I go in and talk about forensics and I talk about individuals who may have a learning disability but may have been rapists or arsonists or, murderers, and those are individuals that grow within the community, people say, we don't know about that. And we don't talk about what goes on out there.
There's so much that goes on in the community.
It's huge. And there are so many options of care that you can go into.
Yes.
You don't have to go in at, the basic level. You might have to learn your trade, but you might choose to go in as, a regional manager doing something different. You might choose to do the housing side. You might choose to do the HR side. It's not just care. There is so much more to it that you could do.
For current care providers who listen to the podcast, this is a takeaway for them, because a typical care provision is owned by baby boomers. They probably run it like as a one-man band and with a certain kind of way of running a business. Social care sector, from my own experience, primarily consists of SMEs. So what advice would you give to a provider to help encourage people like yourself? This is to you, Willow and Albert.
I'd say that, I guess, when you see jobs in homes advertised or by a kind of branch or something like that, but the last time I saw something like that, it was outside of Tesco's and it was literally a white piece of paper like join care, and it's like, wow, there was nothing about it. Or you see the other side, if it's like a quick flash on TV where it's kind of like a join the army vibe, they're not angled or pointed at anyone. That's so broad and open in an advertising manner or a marketing manner. It almost sometimes is a bit desperate, like we really need people like come in. There's nothing about it that makes you go, I'm going to be joining something and it's going to be like this amazing thing. You kind of just go, oh God, they really need people. No. And like I think Albert can probably say the same. In our kind of creative realms, we've probably both had to climb this financial ladder of like being 1 month you've got money, then you'll have 3 months of no money, especially in freelancing. Jobs come and go, but you still don't tend to fall back on that side of things, because the side that goes your kind of intelligence or your degree or your specific skills, that you never see a thing that says that could be used. Although Mum has said in the past with event stuff, like I could come in and do event planning or music stuff with them, but there's not any fluffing of anything. It never goes descriptive Yeah.
But how about you, Albert?
Firstly, I really appreciate being called talent. Even in this conversation, what does talent define? Like, are we talking about people say in similar positions to Anna? Is it, like Willow was saying, is quite broad when you do see the very limited amount of advertising. And when something's broad, I feel like your mind just goes to, the stereotype of care, which is, like wiping bums kind of thing.
Yeah.
So maybe like more detailed advertising of different positions, for instance, Anna's saying like HR and property, or that kind of stuff. Because I feel like when it is going to the kind of the stereotype of it, like who wants to become a nurse at the moment kind of vibe, it doesn't get good publicity in the media. Advertising the kind of more problem solving, the rewarding side of it, rather than like, hop on a sinking ship kind of thing,
Yeah.
I think knowing that you
agree with
can
you.
make money, like knowing that you can actually like climb the ranks and make money and actually have your own individualistic ideas and stuff around it, like you can help actually build like what the future of is going to be like. I don't think anybody really does know about that at all.
If you throw something else into the mix, what if, for a bit of extra money, this is where we're not thinking outside the box within the care sector. So, what if I've got a young group of individuals who are, learning to transition? Well, actually, wouldn't it be amazing if Albert did some really basic photography stuff with them? He would make money because there's funding out there everywhere for this type of thing. And, it might not.
Absolutely.
But Willow goes in and works with youngsters who've got a mild learning disability or who've got autism, and she does DJing with them.
I would totally do that as well,
Think about this. So we don't go outside the box and just really look at what could Willow bring to this, what could Albert bring to it.
But is that a matter of funding? Is there pockets of money for someone for that to go out to people? Because if you did start doing that and someone could see those things, I think that would make so much sense.
Great question.
Yeah, we've got young people now who are, maybe nail technicians. We've also got young people who've qualified to, do hair and makeup. And they're actually, somehow, a few youngsters have worked out that if they reach out to care homes and dom care providers and individuals living in supported living, they're actually going in and doing that. And people like beauty treatments. The men like to have their beard done. This is really quite graphic, but actually, when your granny is in a care home and she's got a beard because no one's paid attention to her, which isn't very often, but it happens, actually, that's not how they wanted to look before they got dementia. So somebody coming in and saying, what would you like? Oh, I'd like pink nails today. And while I'm doing that, I'd quite like to be listening to music. And over in the corner, Albert's doing something with photography. These are the bits that we don't think about and we don't offer. And yes, there isn't a lot of money out there right now, but there is funding available. And actually, a lot of people in care can afford to have some form of treatment or some type of lesson. There's so many bits. It's not just being a carer. It's what value can you bring into somebody's life?
Okay, so Anna, so I could just imagine a provider listening to this conversation and nodding in agreement and saying, okay, I want to get Willow and I want to get Albert on board, but at the local authorities, how the referrals come in. They aren't really given that flexibility because there is an element of truth to what Willow and Albert's saying. When these providers are advertising, they are desperate. They probably, maybe a package has come in last minute. They've said they could do this. They've maybe accepted onto a framework, for example, and you have a team of 40 and you've gotten a package that requires, 2 full-time staff or whatever. So you need to fill that role real quick. So you're just trying to put out lots of fires. And that's why lots are seen as desperate.
Maybe let's look at the Swedish model. The Swedish model is incredible. They work with universities. So Albert and Willow, when they're at university, they would have had the option to live in a care village or a care home or work as a dom care support worker in return for free accommodation and free food. And that would mean that a couple of nights a week, they might have to do one night shift, or a couple of days a week, they might have to do an entire shift. It's more about companionship. And that is a model that we should be really, really looking at because, they're going to get free accommodation, they're going to get food, they're going to be in an environment where they're sharing their life with others. And why don't we do that right from the beginning? It's such a basic, obvious answer. Some people would never want to do it. It's not their cup of tea. But some people who don't want to do it, but could do with the free accommodation, might go and then go, this is bloody brilliant. It's what I want to do. There are so many innovative ways of working with the next generation to entice them in or to also make them think, I never want to do that. I made the right decision. We just don't do enough. And you're right, there will be some providers thinking, I don't agree with Anna, we're not all desperate, but actually we are in big trouble with the white paper. People that you and I, Obi, we know have come over here and done a brilliant job and, really worked hard, and we're basically saying, sorry, off you go, we don't care.
Yeah.
And that's another option removed now. And these individuals have been incredible and supported us, and we're going to really struggle. So we need to do something right now, because potentially we've missed the boat with Willow and Albert. They're 27, but we've got younger people. I've got younger children, and the youngest one has just decided, although he's doing a law degree, he's going to do some forensic work through the summer working with a dom care provider, because he's realised that would be quite beneficial financially for his future. Why aren't we saying to the universities with the law students, are any of you thinking of doing that? We're just not thinking about it.
Have we really missed the boat with Willow and Albert? I don't know, because I was going to say, because the care business should be a legacy business, because it's a very emotional business. So you would think that whenever whoever is running the business, you're putting so much emotion and you have so many clients that rely on this particular service, it's handed from one generation to the next. So if you don't mind me saying, your business as an example, Anna, because you're saying, okay, Willow, she's not interested. You have amazing clients that rely on you. So how would you turn your business into a legacy business? This is the narrative. This is the same thing with lots of other companies, because the younger generation, they don't care about care or handing over. So for someone in your position, for example, what can they do?
I think it would start with, what do you want to get from it? And what can you give? And then what do you need to earn from it? And what will you get from it? And the reality is, because they've never done it, they don't know right now. But to be able to kind of take Willow or Albert off and do some shadowing and come with me at some of the more high level consultancy stuff, not that I think I'm high level, it's just it's a little bit high level, they would get incredible insight into something like, this team has gone completely wrong, we've got to fix it, we've got to sit down, we've got to start again, what's not working, who doesn't get on with who, let's look at these different floors in this care home, why is the top floor working really well and this one isn't, what's the issue with this particular client? And I'll give an example. There's a provider recently where there's a young lady who's a hoarder and she will not engage with anybody, and I think there've been 6 different providers, and actually it would be perfect to send Willow and Albert in, because what if they cracked it? And what happened was, a young person from this particular dom care provision went around every day and put notes through the door, and then would kind of wave from the window and just work day after day. And one day she opened the door and said, you can come in for 10 minutes. And now this person goes in for an hour a day. They're beginning to kind of declutter, and she's slowly working one more member of staff in. That's a real skill and a real talent. And, they're the sort of examples we kind of need to give. And, a dementia home, for example, it's not full of people dribbling in a corner, rocking and screaming. It's actually for individuals who just want to be touched, want to be held, want to have their needs met, want somebody to engage with them. You don't need to be playing war tunes and, brass bands. You may have well seen, there was a video on YouTube the other day with a care home, and they're playing drum and bass and everyone's up dancing, and because it's a beat, it's a music, it's happy.
Just before I let you guys go, I asked this question because there are providers who listen to this and they want to use feedback from what you're saying to either improve their service or to attract homegrown talents. As the white paper announcement said, we need to look into attracting homegrown talents rather. So what does this look like? Will commissioners allow the flexibility that requires to get Gen Zs to work? Someone like Willow as an example, or Albert, work in transitionary service. For dom care, is there enough flexibility for that to happen? Do you understand what I'm asking? I feel like it's so... Okay, let me give you an example. In a dom care setting, say a provider wins a bid and you're required to provide a certain amount of services every week, 3 hours a day to a service user. How can a provider like that attract someone like Willow? This is the reality of dom care. And if we're saying that we need to attract homegrown talent, How do you do that?
Sophie, this is really simple. So let's say it was a dom care provider who was working with people transitioning from children's to young adults. Well, wouldn't you want somebody like Willow, who has got, the background with music, with clubbing, with DJing, can talk about her experiences? Wouldn't you want someone like Albert, who's been to university, did a bit of gardening, did this, did that, now is working in post-production, but actually one afternoon a week, you get a bit of time with Albert. And actually, what's wrong with that? Albert would just do his basic learning, but actually his time is spent with somebody who wants to know about Albert and wants to know about Willow. There's so many different ways that we can do this. And it's really not what the commissioners think. It's how you deliver it as a provider. So what if you advertise because there's a particular individual, it's person-centred about them, and Willow's in Bristol, Albert's in London, and you put a flyer out or you put a really good message out going, is anyone really interested in drum and bass who can spend a bit of time with this person, or who's done photography? This person would actually like to go to university and do photography, but who's got the confidence, who'd like to mentor them.
Okay.
So many ways. And that mentoring can turn into an hourly rate, that can turn into a positive relationship. That, what if Albert mentored that person to the point where they got accepted to university, and part of Albert's role was to track them at university and check in once a month.
Okay. So you're saying
flexible in the way we work with this stuff.
Okay, so Albert, so just before you go, so you're saying, okay, if you don't mind me asking you, if a care provider approaches you and they say to you, so we have a care package and we're required to deliver personal care for this individual 12 times. Well, we have 12 hours. We've been allocated 12 hours in a week, and an average working hour is 40 hours in a week, but we've been allocated 12 hours. So out of the 12 hours, we have 4 hours allocated to photography. How can they advertise it to someone like yourself? Because that's the reality. Packages of dom care are really small in the numbers they allocate to an individual. So how can they advertise to someone like yourself? Do you understand the question I'm asking?
I think so. I think it's this idea of like part-time, because everyone's, struggling for a little bit of extra cash at the moment, and with living prices. So like, I feel like advertising on top of maybe say like a full-time job, like, working 40 hours a week, maybe advertising as like a kind of like a couple evenings a week, or maybe like a weekend, as like a bit of extra cash, and also like a way of, I think a lot of creative people, I know a lot of people who are like artists who are really struggling to find the time and the energy. You obviously benefit from like either you work out what you don't know about something, or, you've developed new ways of, creating. So I think maybe going through more of like advertising it as like you're helping someone, but you're also developing your creative practice kind of thing.
What do you have to add to that?
I agree. It made me also realise I have quite a few friends who did creative degrees who struggled to make money and kind of slip into the occupation in a full-time manner, who have actually ended up doing kind of like creative therapies in healthcare or in prisons and stuff like that. So that is definitely something that I guess around Bristol, that's actually quite accessible. That has just made me think of that. And then I think again, like, sadly our generation, we are a generation of side hustling and a generation of, like in the female element, there's like being a boss queen that works all the time, because we've come into a time and a place where it's like women can work, but then it's kind of come to our demise at the same time, because now our pride is landing on how much we do work, and people are doing so many things, but actually having something like that where you are learning and growing with an individual, learning other skills that can take you to other places, I do think is the perfect drop in the ocean for that. And I know a lot of kind and creative people who would probably run at that if they even knew it was something.
I think if my sister was advertised it, I think she'd jump at that. It's the kind of perfect thing for her, who's working in a job that she doesn't necessarily want to work in, wants to get a portfolio.
Can I jump in as well here and say, here's the other bit with Willow, talking about the female side and the boss queen bit, and I agree, but actually our biggest problem is we don't have enough men in care, and it's never attractive to men, and the men who are in care are absolutely brilliant, and we need far more male carers, because young men who are in care don't always want to be supported by a woman, and they don't want to, have maybe personal care by a man, or even just want to have a male-to-male conversation that they're embarrassed about.
What's really sad about that is my side hustle job. I work 3 days a week at a kind of like community co-working place where we have a lot of disabled individuals that come in to use the space. The main group, called the Misfits, who are an acting and dancing class, all the male carers are non-white British carers, and to me they are the best at their jobs. So like this, everything that we're talking about that falls back to it, like that group of individuals, all of their carers that they come with are majoritively non-white British, and they are the happiest, kindest, loveliest carers, and those men are so lovely. And you know, again, they've got the strength for the ones that are more likely to be a bit more aggressive, but they deal with it so well. So I can imagine how much that affects.
And you know, the last bit I was going to throw in here is there aren't very many festivals for adults with learning disabilities. There aren't many festivals for individuals with dementia who love music. Why are we not doing that? There's yet another opportunity. And, you know, actually, you don't just happen to have it for an individual with learning disabilities. What if other people come and they go, actually, I'd quite like to do this as a career? Wow, look at Willow on the decks with her.
There's a lot of people in my industry that work within accessibility. I have to write accessibility kind of bills for the club, and we are constantly growing. And, you know, there's this whole... It's kind of a lot of people are using the like greenwashing, blue washing, but actually I had to say to someone the other day, it's not blue washing, it's absolutely important, and it has to be done. And a close friend that I work with, that is her full-time job in accessibility. But again, the funding and the access for them to even bring that to festivals on a basic level is really lacking. But there are so many people from my side of the industry in production and in management that would definitely, if that was accessible, go into helping those kind of people and maybe even being able to create a festival. But the funding for that, I can imagine being crazy.
But you then you flip it on the other side where we're talking about it being funded for people. Actually, the majority of people who are in care or being cared for or being supported do have their own money, and they do receive benefits, and they do get really substantial amounts of money that they can choose to do things with. You know, they might have their own personal funds. And actually, we worry all the time about how's it going to be afforded. But actually, sometimes we have to remember the root of this whole conversation is the person that we're supporting. And that person might choose to do that. And it looks like we've solved all the world's problems now, Obi.
This has been very insightful, because when the Prime Minister made the announcement, everybody was going crazy. Oh, my goodness, you're talking about the homegrown talent. We don't even get them walk through the door. Lots and lots and lots of providers were saying, I've put out job applications. We don't have any responses. And it's really interesting to actually hear why. Willow said they sound desperate. So it just sounds like, okay, and she sees a lot of value in herself. So she doesn't want to just respond to an application that sees her as an afterthought or whatever. And then Albert goes, well, you haven't really sold it to me. So if there was one thing providers or our listeners providers should take away from this is, you do have people like Willow and Albert who do want to work in the sector. So you need to take that into consideration when you're going into the market. So saying that homegrown talent aren't interested, is that really the right narrative? From this conversation, I feel like that narrative could possibly be wrong, because there are homegrown talent interested. However, they're not really being sold social care the right way.
This is down to us as care providers, isn't it? And it's about getting tangled up with the NHS. We are a team. The NHS and the care sector are a team. But actually, like Albert said, there's this going on and there's this going on. This is down to us as the care sector to say, listen to what Albert and Willow are saying. Listen to the conversation that's coming out of here. You've got to do it differently. Holding a job spare is not the way to do it. It just isn't. It's different types of adverts. An advert there's so many different things you can put together. So there's an individual who's very famous, and his adverts start with, can your heart stop still in a moment? Can you do something to change somebody's life? He gets welders applying for jobs because they go, I really like the advert. If the bus stops and somebody gets off, look at that. That's what we have to do. We have to go into universities. We have to look at that Swedish model I was talking about. If we're saying to Albert, well, come down the road. Can you do 3 hours at 25 quid an hour with this young man who'd like to do this? Willow, I've got 4 people who want to learn how to be a DJ. It's going to be tricky, and there's going to be points when you're going to be tearing your hair up, but you're going to have great fun. That's what we need to do.
That as well, you know.
That's amazing, because when providers complain about, we don't have people looking, you're here saying, actually, I would absolutely love to do that. And a lot of times providers complain about not having enough hours. But then if you do have limited hours, here's Willow and Albert saying you can allocate. I'm more than happy to do 4 hours in a week if this is going to be impactful if I'm going to feel fulfilled, I'm more than happy to do that. So
I was going to say that what they've just said, it's really made me think as well. And we always think about, well, it's got to be done in this way, and we've got a 4-hour window, and it's got to be delivered like that. And actually, it doesn't, because if you think about it, if Albert's only available for 6 hours a month, take those 6 hours and use them well. If Willow's going off to do some DJing in Albania or whatever, but she's going to come back for 6 weeks and she needs to earn some money, take Willow for 6 weeks. It doesn't have to be prescriptive.
Yeah. And I think that's where the hard work is going to have to be for providers, because we know this, and our providers would be like, oh, continuity of care. When, if, for example, Willow comes in and says, oh, well, I can do this, however, I'm going to have to go away in 6 weeks or 6 months, the first thing the provider would think about is, okay, continuity of care. When the CQC, when I'm having my CQC registration, how am I going to be able to evidence that I'm able to provide continuity? So all of these red flags would start popping up. However, it doesn't have to be like that, because you could actually structure it in a way where that could work in your advantage. So I believe that's the conversation, and that's the narrative that we need to be having in terms of social care, attracting people like Willow and Albert, who, like you said, from this conversation, we've learned that people within your networks right now, as we speak, would love to join care, and they are available. So there clearly are homegrown talents right now that would love to join. Thank you guys so much for your time. And before we go, as we're coming to the end of this amazing conversation and very insightful conversation, and I know you're busy, so I want to really let you go. I just want to hear from each and every one of you, because we're going into a new phase. We know that this white paper is just the beginning. There's going to be lots of conversations that's going to be had, and I'm sure myself and Anna are going to have lots more conversations with other people on this topic. But just before you go, Willow and Albert, as we're still in this topic of attracting clients like yourself to the sector, what is your last word? How can we get you to come into the sector? What is the main thing that we could do today? I
think we need to be sold differently on it, not necessarily as a full-time career, maybe as, to begin with, like part-time. Part-time you could just like hanging out or talking or, doing stuff like that, rather than like a full-time, like intense career and also like advertise like, the higher salaries and stuff like that.
Thanks, Albert. That being said, if I was to add to that, within the umbrella, and I'm sure Anna, you'd have more to add to this as well, within the umbrella of social care, yes, it allows you the flexibility of, I love what you said, advertising it as something you can also do in addition to what you're currently doing, but there are careers that could be had as well. And you can have a great career, a decent career. You can earn a decent wage from social care. I just wanted to add that too, in addition to doing it on the side, in addition to what you're currently doing as well.
Yeah, of course. I'm more thinking for my perspective, because I don't think I'd ever take up a full-time thing, but I would, like, after this conversation, I would consider doing like a part-time, once a week kind of job,
Oh, brilliant. That's made me smile. All right. How about you, Willow?
This even comes into my normal job when I'm thinking about marketing the club and event. Like right now, like say with social media marketing or like job advertising, people like to see like BTS, like behind the scenes.
Okay.
And I think all of this for young people of our generation who have kind of grown up scrolling, or like that, that's where we're spoken to the most. It's like actually having access to behind the scenes, seeing what the roles are like, because the same as Albert, this has become a lot more attractive to me.
Okay.
And I think that like actually not just having the NHS narrative and not just having the dramatized versions of like healthcare and stuff like this, actually seeing and a non-sterile version as well, like actually seeing raw kind of versions of what this is, or seeing like the timeline of, cool, I started here, but now I'm here. And like I started on this money and now I'm on that money. And it's like incentives, like we're in the information generation. We have access to a lot of things. And if the access we've had isn't positive, then that's what needs to happen. We need to have the positive access to the information and to what these roles could be. Because again, I would definitely go and do like a DJ workshop, or my whole career is around management. I could definitely kind of slip into something that what mum does, but with obviously way more further education on healthcare. But it's having the accessibility, definitely for people our age, being able to start a couple of days a week or one day a week, and then knowing how we can, and having that kind of behind the scenes knowledge of people that I guess are our age, younger people, not just like the older people that have done it, or not people that are from one certain background, it's like that whole diversity behind it and the teams.
So you mean like on TikTok right now, if you're scrolling on TikTok and you see a video of a care provider, like advertising, like a carer, for example, or support worker saying, actually, this is what I do. And you see a video of a support worker taking someone out to a festival or taking them to do some sort of photography work with them. That's what you guys want to see.
Or even it doesn't even need to be creative. Like even if it is just like anything like that, it's just the real life visualization of it.
There is actually family members on my TikTok, people with like autism, and like I've learned so much more just through scrolling on TikTok. Whereas if that was kind of like channeled into like an employment like strategy, I feel like that could be very
you're so right,
very beneficial. Because like you do watch them because it's super interesting, and like from my perspective, it's not something I see.
Yeah.
And you see, like you learn that there's so much more to these people than you initially think.
Yes, absolutely. Oh my goodness, that's been very insightful.
Throw this in, Obi. Willow was a year old at the age she's at now. I'd had her, and it wasn't easy, but it was a hell of a lot easier than these guys have it. For them to be able to buy houses, for them to be able to do the things that I had access to is really tough. And actually, yes, health and social care is a career, but actually that's where we need to flip it on its head. It's exactly what Albert said and what Willow said, and we're not thinking about that. Not everybody has to have it as a career, but they can have it as a part of their life, and they can have it as a part of their delivery, and they can have it, like they said, as a side hustle. And I'm sorry if people don't like that. Maybe it's not an appropriate terminology for working with an individual who needs care and support. But actually, if they're doing it with the right values, if they're doing it because they want to, if they're doing it to earn some extra money to put towards a mortgage that they would like to have or something, it's a win-win. So we have to move forward. We have to change our mindset. And actually, I think, Willow and Albert have been really good ambassadors today for me, for you, to understand where we're getting it wrong and to be able to work with them and understand what we can do. Because, so what if someone doesn't want it as a full-time career? But what if, as they're doing it as a side hustle, suddenly they think, maybe I do? And we've sucked them in.
Which always happens. Anna, Willow, Albert, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for joining this. We're all going to have care one day. So we need to have these conversations to decide and to ensure that the right people are attracted to the sector. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you.
Bye.
Enjoyed this episode. We would love to hear from you. Let us know what about this episode you liked and how we can improve. Join our growing community of providers and carers who are learning new processes and technology, discovering proven best practices, growing through insights from industry experts, all from people creating real practical solutions in care. This is the Health and Social Care Business Podcast.